Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
Once upon a time, when Henry IV became King of France, things weren't all peaceful. Even though he brought calm to the kingdom, there were still fights between groups who didn't like each other. Some Catholics were angry and went away to live in faraway places, waiting for a chance to show their anger openly. In a big castle on a steep hill near the town of Nantes lived the last family member of the Villeneuve family, a young and pretty lady named Constance. She had lost her father and brothers in the wars, so she stayed alone in her castle, wearing black to show her sadness. That's why she didn't go to parties at the king's palace. But she was rich and had a big name, so the king said she should marry someone noble. But Constance didn't want that. She wanted to become a nun and live in a convent. The king said no, thinking she was just sad and would change her mind later. A year went by, but Constance still wanted to be a nun. So, the king decided to visit her castle to see why she wanted to be a nun so badly. Constance had spent many days crying and feeling lonely. She didn't let anyone visit her and stayed sad all the time. She tried to fight her sadness but couldn't. She felt better when she gave in to her sadness instead of trying to ignore it. Constance left her castle to walk in the nearby gardens. Even though her castle was big, she felt trapped inside its walls. The open fields and old trees reminded her of happy times, so she liked spending time there. The movement of the wind in the trees and the sunlight made her feel better and eased the sadness she felt in her heart. There was a special spot at the edge of the forest where she could see the countryside beyond. It was surrounded by tall trees, and even though she promised herself not to go there, she always ended up there without realizing it. She sat on a grassy hill and looked sadly at the flowers she had planted there, thinking about her past and the people she loved who were gone. She held a letter from the king that made her very sad. She wondered why she, so young and alone, had to deal with this new sadness. I just want to live in my father's house, in the place where I grew up. I want to cry at the graves of my loved ones and remember the happy times I had in these woods. But now all hope is gone, she thought sadly. Suddenly, she heard rustling in the bushes and her heart raced. But then everything was quiet again. Silly me, she said to herself. I'm just imagining things because this is where we used to meet. Every little sound makes me think of him. Oh, Gasper, you'll never come back to this place again. But then she heard footsteps again, and this time they were slower and steadier. She thought it might be her maid Manon, but when she looked, she saw it was him, the man she loved, Gasper. She wanted to run away, but she couldn't resist staying for a moment to see him again. I'm here, lady, said the young knight, not hoping to change your mind. I just wanted to see you one last time before I go to the Holy Land. I'm leaving forever. I beg you not to hide in a dark convent to avoid someone like me, someone you'll never see again. Whether I live or die, I won't be in France anymore. That would be sad if it were true, said Constance. But King Henry won't let his favorite knight go so easily. You helped him become king, so you'll still be by his side. Please don't go to Palestine, especially if it's because of me. One word from you could make me stay, one smile, Constance, said the young man, kneeling in front of her. But Constance remembered her decision. even though it was hard to see someone she once loved so much, now forbidden to her. "Don't stay here any longer," she cried. "I'll never smile or speak to you again. Why are you here, where the spirits of the dead wander? They curse me for letting their murderer disturb their rest." "When we were in love and happy," replied the knight, "you showed me these woods and welcomed me to this spot where we promised to be together, even though our families were enemies." "It was wrong," said Constance, "to let my father's enemy into our home, and now we're paying for it." The knight gained courage as she spoke, but he didn't want to scare her away. He replied slowly, "Those were happy but troubled times, Constance. Even though our families hated each other, we found love here in these woods." "Those were unhappy days," said Constance, "when I thought disobeying my family would bring me happiness." "Don't talk about love, Gasper. We're separated forever by bloodshed. Stay away from me. The dead and the beloved stand between us. Their shadows warn me and threaten me for listening to their murderer." "That's not me," exclaimed the knight. "Look, Constance, we're the last of our families. Death has left us alone. It wasn't like that when we first fell in love. Everyone hated the Villeneuve family, but I saw you and loved you anyway. Love brought us together secretly in these woods. Shall we break our vows?" Constance cried as her lover talked about the happy times they had. "Never," she said. "You know, or will soon know, Gasper, that I can't be with you. We can't talk about love and happiness when there's war and hate around us. The flowers we picked were crushed by the fighting. Your father killed mine, and it doesn't matter if you admit it or not. You fought with those who killed my family. Don't say anything else. It's disrespectful to the dead to listen to you. Go, Gasper. Forget about me. King Henry will give you a good life, and some other girl will love you like I did. Goodbye. May the Virgin Mary bless you. I'll pray for our enemies in my convent. Gasper, goodbye." She quickly left the garden and went back to the castle. Once in her room, she cried bitterly, feeling guilty for past happiness and love. Suddenly, she had an idea. At first, she thought it was silly and superstitious, but she couldn't shake it off. She called her servant, Manon. "Manon," she said, "have you ever slept on St. Catherine's bed?" Manon crossed herself. "Heaven forbid. Only 2 people have, and one drowned in the river, and the other left without saying a word. It's a scary place. If someone hasn't lived a good life, they'll regret sleeping there." Constance crossed herself too. "We can only hope for righteousness through God and the saints. I'll sleep on that bed tomorrow night. But, my lady, the king is coming tomorrow. That's even more reason for me to do it. Such intense sadness can't go without a cure. I wanted to bring peace to our families, but now it feels like a punishment. Heaven will guide me. I'll sleep on St. Catherine's bed tomorrow night. If the saint guides her followers in dreams, I'll listen to her. I'll be resigned to whatever happens, believing I'm following God's will." The king was staying at a castle nearby. Early in the morning, a young knight was brought to him. The knight looked sad and tired, even though he was handsome. King Henry looked at him kindly and asked, "So, Gasper, Did you find Constance stubborn? She's decided to make us both miserable. It's one of my biggest sorrows, my liege, that Constance gives up her happiness to destroy mine. And do you think she'll say no to the handsome knight we're presenting to her? Oh, my king, don't think like that. It won't happen. Thank you for wanting to help, but even your commands won't change her mind. She's determined to become a nun. With your permission, I'll leave now. I'm going to be a soldier for the Holy Land. Gasper, said the king. I understand women better than you. She's grieving for her family, and she thinks heaven doesn't want you two to be together. Let her hear the voices of the world, the commands and the kindness, and she'll change her mind. Let's stick to our plan. Now let's go. It's getting late. The king went to the bishop's palace and then to the cathedral for mass. After a big lunch, it was afternoon when he went through the town to the Chateau Villeneuve, just above Nantes. Constance welcomed him at the gate. Henry expected to see her sad and miserable, but she looked happy and lively. She must not love him, Henry thought, or she's already agreed to marry him. They had dinner together, and Henry, surprised by Constance's cheerfulness, mentioned Gasper. Constance blushed and said quickly, "Tomorrow, my king. Please wait until tomorrow. Everything will be decided then. Tomorrow, I'll either be dedicated to God or—" She stopped, looking confused. Henry was surprised and happy. "So you don't hate young de Vaudemont. You forgive him for being your enemy," he said. "We're taught to forgive and love our enemies," Constance replied nervously. "Good. That's a welcome answer," said the king, laughing. "Come forward, Gasper, and thank your lady for her love." Gasper, hiding in disguise, was surprised by Constance's calmness. He couldn't hear her words. Was this the same woman who was crying the night before? He couldn't understand. When the king called him, he rushed forward and found Constance fainting. It was all very confusing. Even when she woke up, she fainted again and then cried a lot. The king didn't know what to say to Gasper's disappointed look. Finally, Constance's servant came and said, "My lady is very sick. She'll come to you tomorrow to apologize and tell you her decision." Tomorrow, again tomorrow. Does tomorrow have some special meaning? Asked the king. "Can you tell us what's happening tomorrow, maiden? What's the secret?" Manon blushed, looked down, and hesitated. But the king knew how to get secrets out of ladies' maids. Manon was scared about Constance's plan, so she easily told him. Constance wanted to sleep on St. Catherine's bed, on a ledge above the fast-flowing Loire River. If she didn't fall into the river, she'd believe whatever strange dreams she had were messages from heaven. Henry couldn't believe any woman would do something so risky, especially someone as smart as Constance. But if she was so determined, she had to do it. Maybe St. Catherine wouldn't be unkind. But just in case, they needed a plan to keep her safe. There's no feeling scarier than wanting to do something you know is wrong. Forbidden pleasures might be exciting for some people, but not for someone like Constance, who was kind and gentle. Love and duty were tearing her apart. Following her religion or superstitions was a relief. The danger made it exciting. If she had to risk her life for love, She would. The danger of death was nothing compared to the pain of losing Gasper forever. The night was stormy, with the wind shaking the windows and trees. Constance and Manon left the castle and went down the hill to the river. The moon hadn't risen yet. Manon was scared, but Constance was brave. They got into a small boat with one man and went into the middle of the river. The warm wind made Constance feel alive for the first time since she was in mourning. She felt hopeful, thinking that maybe heaven wouldn't stop her from loving Gasper. She believed in love. Everything in nature showed it. Would she be the only one denied love, when her heart was full of it? As Constance was lost in her thoughts, Manon suddenly grabbed her arm and pointed. "Look, lady," she cried. "A boat, but the oars make no sound. Oh, Virgin Mary, protect us. I wish we were home." A dark boat glided past them. Four rowers in black cloaks rowed silently, and a figure at the helm, unrecognized, seemed to be Gasper. "Gasper!" Constance called out, but he didn't answer, and the boat disappeared into the shadows. Now Constance's thoughts changed. She felt like heaven was starting to work, and she saw strange things in the darkness. Sometimes she saw the mysterious boat, and other times she thought she saw her dead father and brothers. They reached the landing, and Constance got off the boat, trembling. Manon wanted to go back, but then she mentioned the king and Gasper, reminding Constance of the decision she had to make tomorrow. She hurried up the bank and reached a hill with a small chapel nearby. She unlocked the chapel and they went inside, where a lamp flickered by a statue of Saint Catherine. After praying, Constance said goodnight to Manon and unlocked a small iron door leading to a narrow cave. "You can't come with me, Manon," Constance said. "This is my journey alone." Leaving Manon in the chapel, Constance went through the dark passage until she saw light ahead. She reached a cavern overlooking the rushing river. The night was dark and windy, making Constance shiver. She prepared her bed, a narrow ledge by the edge of the cliff. She took off her cloak, loosened her hair, and lay down on the cold stone, ready to face the night, knowing that if she moved in her sleep, she could fall into the river below. At first, Constance struggled to sleep. The cold wind and her dangerous position made it hard to close her eyes. But eventually, she fell into a gentle dream. She found herself on St. Catherine's bed, with the Loire River below and the wind blowing around her. Then her dreams took her elsewhere, filled with joy or sorrow. She didn't know. Below the rugged hill, Gasper watched anxiously. He had meant to follow Constance but arrived too late. He saw her emerge from the passage and lie down on the narrow ledge. He stayed in his boat, keeping vigil over her, knowing that her love had brought her to this risky place. He stayed awake all night, praying and hoping. As morning approached, Gasper grew impatient. He couldn't wait any longer. Despite the danger, he climbed the steep hill to reach Constance. He finally reached her and saw her sleeping peacefully. Her serene face gave him hope, but suddenly, she cried out in her sleep, her emotions evident on her face. Gasper caught her as she nearly fell, waking her from her dream. Meanwhile, Manon had slept well in the chapel, unaware of the events outside. When she woke up, she found the chapel filled with people, including King Henry. Gaspar entered with Constance, and they approached the altar together. With smiles and blushes, they exchanged vows, uniting them forever. Constance took a while before she told Gaspar about her dream. Despite their happiness now, she still felt frightened when she remembered the days when she thought love was wrong. She had many visions that night. She saw her father and brothers in heaven, Gaspar fighting bravely among enemies, and Gaspar at King Henry's court, happy and loved. She saw herself in different situations, sometimes in a cloister, sometimes as a bride, sometimes grateful for happiness, and sometimes sad. Then she found herself in a Paynim city, guided by Saint Catherine. In a palace, she saw the enemies celebrating victory. In the dungeons, she found a prisoner who looked like Gaspar, weak and thin, chained up. Gaspar joked about his appearance in her dream, but Constance believed it was a message. She thought she was responsible for his suffering and felt guilty. Seeing him in that state made her realize the value of life and love. She wanted to save him from death and make him happy. She tried to reach out to him in her dream, but Gaspar's presence saved her from danger, showing her that love could conquer all.